God is good, and with each day that passes brings us a day closer to the launch of Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. This is the Nathan Napalm channel, and if you are new here, please consider subscribing, especially if you're interested in Pantheon related content, CRPGs, JRPGs, RPGs, all that kind of thing. Today, guys, I want to cover a question I've seen pop up quite a few times, and that is, will EverQuest players have an advantage in Pantheon Rise of the Fallen? We're going to deep dive this question with all the evidence that's been made public regarding Pantheon and come up with a solid conclusion. Before we begin, though, I want to give a big shout out to the members of Napalm. Thank you all so very much for your support. You keep this channel alive, and for that, I thank you. If you are interested in becoming a member, please click the join button down below for more information and a list of perks. Alright, so because Pantheon was spearheaded and lifted off the ground with all of the tenets and core game philosophies and designs by the late and great Brad McQuaid of EverQuest fame, naturally, there will always be comparisons between the two on every single piece of the world, characters, lore, classes, and so on. This is only natural as Pantheon is bringing back the old school spirit of classic MMOs such as EverQuest. However, any lore, music, story elements, characters, or anything from EverQuest will absolutely not be in Pantheon, as Pantheon is a completely new world, a new IP, and it's worth noting up front that Pantheon is inspired by many old school MMOs, not simply just EverQuest. Now, we are going to talk about some of the key commonalities of the two games, but before we do, I want to state that Pantheon wants the spirit of the old school genre, but to evolve and modernize it. Visionary Realms is taking what made those games feel like worlds and not simply games, and bring them back to us old MMO players as well as to a new generation of gamers that maybe have not experienced that kind of game before. But what does EverQuest and Pantheon really have in common? I think there are a few common traits, amongst more of course, but let's explore some of these first. General difficulty. EverQuest was known for being ruthless with corpse runs, hard to solo mobs, getting trained, or basically a huge army of wild beasts following you all bloodthirsty trying to kill you all the way to the zone line. And Pantheon's going to share that spirit, but bring it more into a modern era. So what does modernizing that look like at this particular point in development of Pantheon? Well, corpse runs in Pantheon, for one thing, look very different. You do return to your bind spot, you lose a percentage of your current experience towards your next level, you take a durability hit to equipment, inventory stays on your corpse, including currencies. However, you do respawn with your equipment you were wearing upon death. Now, first of all, this could change from testing, alpha, beta, that kind of thing, but this is what they have planned. This opposed to literally everything dropping on vanilla EQ and you respawn naked and have to get back to retrieve everything is quite a difference. Limited action set. So EverQuest only allowed you a small amount of ready-to-go abilities as opposed to modern MMOs where you can fill several bars of abilities and spend your time looking at them for the majority of the gameplay for cooldowns, etc. Pantheon is planning more of an EverQuest type design, which allows the player to memorize what they have and have that out ready to go and spend more time looking at the game instead of the UI. It also provides very strategic gameplay and what abilities for the specific content you are going to do that you will choose what you want to have available. This gets really interesting with spellcasters, in my opinion, pulling the spells and memorizing those from your spell book that you think you'll need. Classes are very unique and interdependent. So since both EverQuest and Pantheon are heavily focused on being group games, the classes reflect that in many ways. Now, I'm not here to say that soloing is impossible in EverQuest, or that it will be in Pantheon either, but what I am saying is that the classes are built to work together and complement one another. Having insert any class here will bring utility and more options for the group regardless of what that class is. This is the kind of balance that EverQuest has, not trying to make every class be able to do everything, quite the opposite, actually making each class matter in one way or another. Also, for everything that a class is good at, there are other things it is not good at and needs to depend on others to make up for their weaknesses. This is very similar to Pantheon classes and how they are being developed as well. Open world gameplay. So EverQuest Classic was very much an open world game, no instance dungeons. Everyone played together publicly on each server. Pantheon is also opting for that. Not to say there absolutely will be zero instancing, as they have always stated for story purposes they may be forced to do a little bit of instancing. But guaranteed is that Pantheon will have public zones, public cities, public dungeons, and public raid zones. Now there are more, but as you can see, these are all very philosophical in nature. They are core pieces of gameplay, not actual gameplay itself. There are a lot of similarities, and it is obvious that the brainchild of EverQuest obviously laid the foundations for Pantheon as well. So EverQuest players are going to feel very comfortable and very cozy in the world of Terminus. However, there are some key differences I would like to speak on as well, such as leveling up. Although Pantheon will have a much longer journey to max level, the devs, and I mean from modern MMOs, the devs at VR are designing it to happen at a faster pace than vanilla EverQuest, in my opinion. And you can bet that the gameplay will feel much more varied during your journey as opposed to the classic EverQuest method of mainly simply camping mob spots as your primary source of XP. And you could play Pantheon this way too if you so choose, but there are a ton of distractions in Pantheon is the best way I can think to put it, from things like the perception system, which entices you to explore further or delve deeper into the lore and story of the world, the disposition of mobs changing your tactics and making you move along and crawl your way through dungeons as opposed to one spot camping, Easter eggs or exciting little pockets of quests that lead you and your group into a different adventure than what was originally planned. So leveling up will feel very different and yet still somewhat familiar to the EverQuest style. But no, EverQuest players will not get any benefit from having played EverQuest when leveling up in Pantheon, in my opinion. Exploration. So in Pantheon, number one, you can climb any surface. And obviously, as you might expect, the devs have taken advantage of that in the verticality of zones and dungeons, making exploring a totally different beast than it was in EverQuest. However, we've also heard the devs talking about things like at night, a zone might be more dangerous than it was in the day. EverQuest players will be more familiar with this mechanic than most and might be looking around at the sun setting in that deep forest and say, hey guys, are we still safe here? Whereas a non-EQ player may not. So there could be some very small advantage there, but is that really an advantage? I don't think it warrants it, and I can't think of any reason an EQ player would really get an advantage out of this, but I'll leave that up to you. Raiding. So early EverQuest raiding was so different than what people call raiding today in so many different ways. I will gladly admit that it invented raiding as we know it, but it has evolved so much. And although we don't know much about raiding, we can tell that Pantheon will be very different than EverQuest was in its classic days, and this comes in so many forms. Acclamation gear to go to the place and survive and make it to the raid boss, for example. But also, I do believe the actual raid fights themselves will be a lot more mechanical, more moving, more teamwork, and a true exercise for you and your guildmates or static group than EverQuest Classic. Now, I know EverQuest has evolved over time with the raiding scene, so don't absolutely break my neck over that. So anyone with a ton of raid experience in honestly any MMO will find some advantages in raiding, as in the lingo, knowing about different distances needed, or when to split the group, or when to run away, or when to huddle together. But I don't see EverQuest specific players having an advantage here, in my opinion. Now I could keep going, but I think I can touch the rest up with this simple statement. Honestly, if you want an advantage in Pantheon, the best you can probably do is just simply play an MMO, or play Dungeons & Dragons. Play EverQuest, and it will help you respect the game Pantheon will be, perhaps, but not to gain some sort of knowledge on the game. Now sure, there are some spells and abilities that really do kind of translate over, or just simply feel right to EverQuest in Pantheon, but then again, there are tons that do not. And the same could be said for Dungeons & Dragons, as EverQuest was inspired by it. So just as D&D players had some small, minute advantage, possibly, when EverQuest released, sure, you could get some small, minute advantage in Pantheon by playing EverQuest. or by playing Dungeons & Dragons. But is it a game changer? Absolutely not. Visionary Realms isn't simply trying to get all lovers of EQ to come play Pantheon, although I would say they've done a darn good job of that, but to pull anyone who wants an adventure, who wants a fantasy world to live in, to explore, to make lifelong friends and memories in an online place called Terminus. If you want to be prepared for Pantheon, then honestly just simply pick an MMO that you can stomach while you wait and play that. You will be learning something that will equate to experience when Terminus unfolds before you and beckons you into its addicting grasp. Final conclusion, no, I do not believe there is some advantage of EverQuest players over those that play Final Fantasy XI or Dark Age of Camelot or any other MMO, honestly, because Pantheon is new, it is different. I hope you enjoyed the video today, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and if you are new here, please consider subscribing, and before we go, I'm going to give another big shout out to the members of Napalm for keeping the lights on. Thank you all so very much, and stay tuned for more Pantheon content right here on the Nathan Napalm channel. And until next time, guys, God bless and happy gaming.
Please listen to what I say. I've been making videos all day. It's a video buffet, you can even hit replay. But please just subscribe. I can't even describe being part of my tribe. I'll even offer you a prize, but please just subscribe and hit the bell notification too.